education, how new thinking is shaping how we teach the next generation of learners. We have two wonderful presenters here today, and I'll get to their introductions momentarily. First, I want to welcome you all. If this is your first webcast, we'd like to hear from you. You could just check the poll options. There's a little check box. Let us know if this is your first webcast with WCET. We will be doing some polls during the webcast today. We'll have 3 polling questions, so this is a good time to familiarize yourself with that poll option. I want to thank Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available to all of us. If you have any technical issues, please contact Blackboard directly. Use the chat box to interact with us today. Only the presenters have speaker access, but we will be looking for your questions and comments in the chat box. And then once we get to the question and the answer portion toward the end of the webcast, we'll revisit those questions. The webcast is being recorded. We'll be sure to share the archive link, the PowerPoint, and any resources that are shared. Again, go ahead and put your questions and comments in the chat box. We'll be monitoring that as we go along. And then at the end of the webcast, we'll get back to those with responses. Today our moderator for the webcast is Ann Derryberry. She's an analyst with Sage Road Solutions, and she's a wonderful friend of WCET, and I think you'll really enjoy Ann moderating and helping us move this conversation along today. So I'd like to pass it over to Ann.
Thank you, Megan. That's very nice of you. And welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many people joining us here today. As Megan said, we're here to listen to 2 wonderful presenters talk about using technology to foster collaboration in education, how new thinking is shaping how we teach the next generation of learners. And for those of us who are thinking about so-called 21st century skills, collaboration is very much top of mind, so this is a timely topic indeed. Our speakers today are both very much involved in thinking about this topic and helping us think about it as well. We'll be hearing from Jennie Carr, who is an assistant professor of elementary education at Bridgewater College in Bridgewater, Virginia, where she develops strong relationships with teacher candidates and incorporates technology into her daily instruction to enhance learning, engagement, and achievement. Jennie obtained her doctorate of philosophy and education from North Central University in 2012 and has published work in the area of technology and academic achievement. She was selected for the Association of Independent Liberal Arts Colleges of Teacher Education Scholar Award this year and is currently researching the impact of technology on care in schools. In just a few minutes, Jennie will talk about how she is teaching teachers to teach collaboration and the value of using collaboration in her own teaching. But before we hear from Jennie, we're going to hear from Alan Greenberg, who is an expert on distance education and e-learning and contributes to the Wainhouse Research personal and web conferencing, streaming, and group video conferencing subscription services, and covers mobile conferencing and the suite of unifying communications technologies as they are applied for education and e-learning. He has more than 25 years of experience as consultant, analyst, communicator, and strategist. He is the author of numerous reports, surveys, forecasts, research notes, and profiles related to distance education and e-learning, mobile video, virtual worlds, web conferencing, interactive whiteboards, and lecture capture. And he is co-author of Wainhouse Research's Web Metrics and User Survey Reports since 2004. And he is also editor of the free Wainhouse Research Bulletin newsletter, and I'm sure he'll be able to share with us how to get a hold of that newsletter if you don't already subscribe to it. Alan's going to present research from his recent white paper entitled The Role of Education in Building Soft Skills, putting into perspective the priorities and opportunities for teaching collaboration and other soft skills in education, which he co-authored with Andrew Nielsen. welcome to you both. Alan, I believe you're up first.
Thank you very much, Ann, and let me also thank everybody for joining us today. Thank Megan and WCET for the opportunity to speak, and especially Jennie Carr, who was recruited to participate and kind of provide some practical discussion and commentary, I guess, to some of what I'll be talking about today. Late last spring, Wainhouse Research interviewed 22 educational practitioners and thought leaders located in North America and Europe. And I was talking to a lot of different kinds of people, former members of parliament in the UK, classroom teachers, principals, professors of education, people like Kurt Bonk, who I know has spoken at WCET's annual event before, Don Passy, I won't even drop names other than to mention Ellen Wagner was one of those, WCET's former director. We use those interviews as a basis for drawing a qualitative report card looking at how well education is doing today in preparing learners for the workforce. And I also use that to contribute to the design of a survey instrument that was fielded last summer to over 1,000 teachers, administrators, parents, and students in the UK and North America. So a lot of my discussion points today are going to come from that survey. The white paper is available at Wainhouse Research's website, by the way, so we'll give you the URL later for downloading that. I think Megan has put together a bit.ly for that. So the thing that I thought about when I was working on this project was the extent to which there's so much pressure to incorporate technology in the classroom and mine the data and get down costs. There's so much noise out there. I think it's important to remember one thing, that you guys out there in the trenches are very busy reading a lot of tea leaves and trying to do a lot. One of the things during the course of conducting the interviews that I heard was and that I believe is the case, is that a lot of people see a lot of excitement or have a lot of excitement in the real change in how learners are getting excited about learning, often using technology to help do that, conducting peer-to-peer learning, and wanting to be in the classroom to make new discoveries. Now, having said that, the path from A to Z is not always quite as simple as we would hope it would be. So I'm showing a cartoon here. I'll give you a minute to take a look at it before I wax eloquent. Excuse me. But my thinking in showing this cartoon was that, we're all here today because we're interested in the topic of educational technology and how it can promote learning. But whether we're talking about two-way video, personal learning networks, virtual classrooms, lecture capture, BYOD and one-to-one learning management systems, we all understand the technologies involved. What we're still getting at as a profession is just how to use the technologies. And what I like about this cartoon is the irony in telling somebody how to become a critical thinker in this way. That's one piece of it that's ironic, but the other thing is the extent to which that's yesterday's model for technology engagement as well, a bunch of learners side by side, individually engaged. We're not going to spend a lot of time on technology today. We will a little bit, and I'm going to talk a little bit about where we could be doing more with technology in the classroom. We're going to be talking about collaboration broadly, and more specifically, one of the things is the ways in which collaboration plays a role, as Ann mentioned, those 4 C's. I get to do, since I'm the lead-off presenter, they let me do whatever I wanted to do, so I just grabbed a few cartoons that looked like fun. There's this other thing called collaborative learning, and I like this one because it's ideal. Its notion is that collaborative learning is great when you got one smart guy in the one smart person, excuse me, at the table. But the thing is, it's coming to be perceived as more than collaboration. It requires a more complex range of interactions with individual skills that are linked to learner skill sets. So it's a little bit messier, less easy to measure process that pushes learners and educators out of their normal comfort zones. It also needs to be centered around more than just one individual. I had a great interview with a science educator in Canada who really focuses on getting his teams to figure it out for themselves without enabling any one person to become the sole contributor, but he doesn't even tell them how to collaborate. He just gets them loose and then is sort of a shepherd in that process. And what I heard from those interviews, and then what I get from the survey data that came from the survey, is that the ability to collaborate is a process. People are struggling with it though. Is it a process, or is it an outcome? Is it based on experience, or is it modeled, or is it taught, or is it something that somebody is born with? And Jennie will comment and have more to say about this later on in the talk. I think the survey data says it's all about the above, but it gets messy when you're talking about trying to deliver the goods. And what are the goods supposed to take us to? Well, they're supposed to take us to the realities of preparing learners for the 21st century workforce. I'll give you a real quick anecdote. About 30 years ago, a friend of mine was visiting me. I live in Austin, Texas, which is well known for its club scene. I don't do that anymore, but back then I had the energy. And we were out, and he met a young lady and mentioned to her that he was getting a PhD in English literature. And she said to him, "Well, isn't that a luxury?" Well, you can guess that was the end of that. They didn't go out, but it's not a luxury when the workforce wants you to be able to read and write well. So at the same time, I think many people are starting to see the 21st century skills not as a luxury, even when the voices out in the ether, the news media, the press makes it sound like there are quick fix solutions to education, and that technology, let's say, is going to be the one solution. So I want to note a couple of studies that I draw upon. One obviously is my own. That's the third one. The first one is one that came out 2 years ago called The Voice of the Graduates, put out by McKinsey. A second one is Falling Short, College Learning and Career Success. That came out last month. So this is really basically just 1-month-old data that comes from a study that was commissioned by the American Association of Colleges and Universities. And then lastly, I'll speak to my study. But first, what we want to do is a real quick poll. So Megan, if you'd go ahead and push that poll question out to the audience. I'd like to know if you believe learners are well prepared by their colleges and universities for employment when they enter the workforce. Now, many of you yourselves are in higher education. I'd like you to try to think big. Think not just your own school. I'm sure your school's doing a great job, but the other guy down the street might need some help. But would you say that learners are well prepared by colleges and universities in general for employment when they enter the workforce? Megan, feel free to give us the results once you think that we're there. So about a third of you, this is going to be fun because we're going to compare it to what I heard from the survey data, but about a third of you, 30% say no, only 5% say yes, and 64% of you need to vote on the next poll. That Voice of the Graduate report, that came out a couple years ago with survey data from more than 4,900 recent graduates. And the mix included attendees of 4-year and 2-year private and public colleges, as well as vocational and for-profit institutions. You can see right there, 30%, very telling, maps to what we heard from you all. 30% of graduates of 4-year colleges and 40% of graduates of 2-year colleges said that they were not prepared for employment. And these were mostly students who graduated between 2009 and 2012, so they'd had some time to enter the workforce and understand how prepared they were. The next report is that Falling Short report from the AACU that was published last month. And so this is the latest and greatest data. And they were asking both employers and students, how well prepared are you across a variety of learning outcomes? And note the spread between the majorities of employers, those are the dark blue, and the light blue would be the learners. One of the things that I don't show here in this data is that the employers continue to say that possessing both field-specific knowledge and a broad range of knowledge and soft skills is important for recent college graduates to achieve success. But look at that spread, especially on working with others in teams, which is part of the conversation today. There's a 27% delta in terms of working with others in teams. 64% of students think that they're prepared, but only 37% of employers. And you see similar kinds of spreads on things like critical and analytical thinking, down the middle of the middle set of bars, written communication, being innovative and creative. You see spreads of 25 to 30% in some of these, applying knowledge and skills to real-world situations and so forth. So this is a very telling recent slide that says that the workforce is looking for something that they feel that they're not getting. Lastly, this next one, actually it's not so much lastly as firstly, because this is the first slide I'm showing from my study. So this comes from this recent white paper on the role of education in building soft skills. About 2 out of 5, 39% of all survey respondents believe that schools are doing a relatively poor job in preparing learners for the workplace. A total of 94%, that left bar, believe schools should have at least some focus on preparing learners, but only 53% say that they're actually doing that, preparing learners for the workplace. So another way to view this is that 41% say their schools should be doing better in focusing on preparing learners for the workplace. Slightly higher number than what we heard from you all today. So where are the schools focusing? About 3 out of 5, a total of 58% believe that too much emphasis is placed on teaching to pass state-mandated standardized tests. Surprise, surprise. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. I did hear some geographical differences I'm not showing you here today. That people in the UK are less concerned. Only about half of them think too much emphasis is placed on mandated tests, but more than 2/3, 67% of North American stakeholders believe so. If you look at the third and second bars, the schools focus on individual achievement and students work alone. Look at the extent to which there you've got 28%, I'm adding up the red and the blue, 28% think students work too much alone, and 24 plus 8% is 32% think they're focusing too much on individual achievement. Well, this has major ramifications for you all as practitioners of distance ed and e-learning and online learning, and for what people like Jennie are doing in educating tomorrow's educators. A lot of people think that schools are focusing too little on the approaches to teaching and learning that are reciprocal, or let's say the opposite side. Group achievement, that next bottom bar, you've got basically 46% saying they're focusing too little. And students collaborating with others outside the classroom, a whopping 60% saying that there's not enough of that. There's too little focus on that. So, meantime, the importance of a variety of skills and traits was something that we asked in that survey. And the ability to collaborate, this one's surprising to me, but the ability to collaborate is important to 95% of those that were surveyed. I'm adding up the blue and the red again, very important or important, and that's just behind problem solving. So those two skills lead the pack, followed closely by
Alan?
persistence. Yeah.
Alan, can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I think that there's a clarifying question that I'd like to toss out so that the rest of this makes sense to people. Someone has asked whether these statistics apply to higher ed or K-12 only.
Right, that's a great question. Yeah, so the stats apply to primarily K-12. This set of stats that I'm showing now from my report, the earlier survey data applied to employers and higher ed, there were people in higher ed. So I don't know the vertical breakdown. Someone else was asking, Molly was asking, what are the vertical breakdowns? We could go look in the original white paper. I can get you that. But this survey data is specifically applying to K-12. But if you think about the food chain of K-12 feeding higher ed, and then higher ed fueling the workforce, I think we felt it'd be compelling data for everybody, but definitely K-12. So I think we're ready for the next poll question, and that is, to what extent should schools focus on collaboration and teaching collaborative skills? And what I'd like to know is whether you would say it's very high or a high amount, some, not much, or not at all. And of course the reason we're asking this is that I'm going to show you some of my data from the 1,000+ people that we surveyed. And by the way, when I mentioned K-12, there were some parents and students who are also being surveyed. So it is an aggregate number of teachers in K-12, administrators, and some students and some parents. So what we have is the very high would be about 9% should skills be focusing, and about 39% of you say high. So that'd be 40. Let's combine that and say 48% of you are saying it should be high or very high, and about 50% of you say nah, not much. Okay. How about that next poll question? Let's go ahead and field that if we could. This one is, to what extent are schools placing high or very high focus on collaboration and teaching collaborative skills? And here I'm very interested in, are you placing high or very high focus, very high and high, or not much and not at all? And we got a comment from David Porter about the issue of collaborative skills versus experiential environments that allow exercise of collaborative skills. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So it does get broken down a little bit more. Here, we got nobody saying their schools are placing a very high focus, and only 4% of you are saying a high focus. Then if I add up those who say not much, it'd be 17%. And I guess the none, it means you didn't respond. Once again, you guys are being a little bit truant today, but that's okay. Not everybody wants to take a poll. So what I heard from my data is that 3/4 of everyone said that schools should have a high focus on collaboration and collaborative skills, but only 32% say that they actually have that. So that's actually just as big a gap as we saw from you all. You all are saying that there should be a high focus, but it's missing a little bit. So, well, what is the impact of collaboration as a focus? I want to move along so we can get to Jennie and her great input. If you look at the first couple of bars here, what is the impact of collaboration? I think many on the webinar today understand that collaboration is a key element of the 4 C's and 21st century learning. In terms of active participation, 92% of the people that we surveyed believe that it promotes active participation, and a similar number, 88%, thinks that teaching collaborative skills helps learners take ownership of their education. Some disagreement exists concerning how far the role of educator should go, and that's because collaboration appears to be perceived as a mode of teaching, to the comment that we got earlier regarding experiential learning and teaching, more than as a subject to teach, and Jennie again will comment on that. About 91% believe that educators need to formally learn how to foster collaboration skills among their students, and 87% believe that learning how to collaborate should formally be included in education curricula. And 87% believe that it's just a way of teaching, but only 67%, still a large number, believe it is a subject to teach. This was a broad group. So the question is it something you just model? Or is there something you smoke to make it happen, or is it something that we have to pay more attention to? And then, does it help foster collaborative skills? So I'm going to wrap up my portion by looking at whether people think technology is helping foster collaborative skills. If you look at the left bar, that's telling us that about 35%, that's the blue and the red combined, would say that technology is used often or always in their schools or classrooms to facilitate collaboration. That's about a third. And more than half, 54%, think that it's used sometimes, and 11% say rarely. So this suggests there's great room in which technology can grow as a tool for helping facilitate collaborative learning. It's not the end-all and the be-all, but it is part of the story. Whether institutions do place a high focus on collaboration and also use technology is what you see in the next two bars. And there what you see is that about 41% would say that they do place, I'm adding 35 plus 6, that red and blue. About 41% would say that they do place a high focus on collaboration and use technology, and only 27% say they don't use much technology and do use technology and place a low focus. So I think my key takeaway from this is that stakeholders believe schools are not focusing enough on fostering collaborative skills and also on using technology. To do a better job, a lot of the people that we talked to and we surveyed think that we need improvements in professional development. We need to offer new methods of assessment and understanding what is collaboration itself and how do you measure it. We need greater leadership, and we need to adopt new approaches to teaching. As somebody I interviewed for the white paper said, you know, the educator has to be willing to turn learning over to the learner. I think there's a lot of confusion in some circles about what that looks like. And that's why I'm delighted to have Jennie Carr here to speak today to talk about what's going on in her School of Education. So Jennie, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I too wanted to welcome you to this webinar and thank Alan for all of his work on his research and Anne for moderating this discussion, and Megan and the WCET team for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. Back to Alan's slide, when he mentioned some about technology, you know, there are several technologies that school districts are employing which claim the integration of these soft skills. However, I'm sure everyone would agree that schools must have access not only to devices but also access to high-speed internet connections, which in my area, which is very rural, can certainly be a problem. As well as strong training on these technologies, specifically focusing, of course, on how to implement the technology in order to maximize their collaborative potential. For me, as a professor of higher ed, it's important that my students have the exposure to a variety of technologies. You know, I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all anything, except for, you know, maybe a cute little summer hat for my kiddos or something like that. But there's no silver bullet in education. So during my coursework, I intentionally introduced my elementary teacher candidates to, as well as personally, use technologies like Smart Amp and Google Apps throughout the semester. But my teacher candidates, as well as, you know, the teachers that I train out in the field, they always want to know what technologies are going to be available to them, and it's frustrating for them to learn about all the wonderful capabilities of a particular technology, but then for them to know in the back of their mind, well, we can't or we don't have access to this technology. So, as I mentioned, for me, it's all about intentional exposure of the technologies and showing our teacher candidates the possibilities that are available to them to integrate these critical and collaborative features that are available. So, in addition, I think you know, teachers need to be trained on how to use these types of software effectively to utilize the program's collaborative skills. But ultimately, as the logo says here, it's all about how the teacher chooses to use the technology. If implemented correctly, technologies like Smart Amp can be extremely powerful tools which can foster skills like collaboration. But we all know, all too often, technologies can be implemented incorrectly. One personal example that comes to mind for me is my teacher candidates will frequently use an interactive whiteboard software such as Smart Notebook in their lesson plan, but their presentation then doesn't have any interactive component. So basically they missed the entire point of integrating that software. They used it, but they didn't access its potential. So really I talked to them about, well, you could have just used a PowerPoint and it would have likely had the same impact. So again, it's how the teacher decides to implement. As I was putting together this presentation, I was recently part of a Twitter chat on Monday night that focused on blended learning, and I don't know if any of you participants out there were a part of it, but one of the questions was about barriers that exist for schools when implementing blended learning. So the response that I tweeted out was something like, weak and untrained or inappropriate implementation, which can cause a negative perception of the strategy or technology, much like I've kind of been talking about. And I received a wonderful tweet back from someone, and he said that he views it as a busyness effect, and the bigger the buzzword, the shallower the implementation. And so I just think we have to be so careful about not only our technology but also our instructional implementation to ensure that we're using strategies and or resources correctly to maximize their potential to enhance the overall student learning experience. So trying to bridge, some of the research that Alan presented so wonderfully and apply it to higher education. And I saw on the roster we have lots of higher ed institutions a part of this session. So thanks for taking the time to be here. What are we wrestling with as a teacher education program to try to promote collaborative skills for teachers of the future? I believe it's all about a shift in thought for our teacher candidates. They, they're in college where, for the most of them, this is their very first opportunity to be truly independent. Very few other students have the same exact schedule in them or participate in the same activities, which causes them to think of themselves as the only one. Now, many, not all, of course, I'm sort of generalizing, think that they're on an island. So when during class they're forced on the island with a classmate, I found the majority of my students, they really dislike it. And I think if I was to poll my candidates right now and ask them, do you prefer to work in teams or would you prefer to work independently? Now, of course, collaboration is not just working in teams or anything like that, but or if they would prefer to work independently. I think that, the vast majority of them would say that they would prefer to work independently. And, I talked to them about this, and they say because they think it's unfair when they work with others. And overall, they have such a negative perception of working with others. And, I think to this analogy here about no man is an island, they just prefer to be on an island by themselves. But we all know that is not the way the world works, and it's certainly not how education works. So we can see, from the research that Alan just presented, focusing and promoting these collaborative skills is such an essential component of teacher education programs that we need to incorporate. So how do we foster and promote these skills so that we can have candidates that bring these qualities into the workplace? I'll have to be honest, I don't know if I have the answer, but I will tell you guys some things that I'm doing to promote these soft skills in my curriculum. So I believe it's my role to push our candidates towards that shift in thought that I mentioned and to show them the true power and the value of collaboration, especially in our future field of education. And in my courses, we don't simply talk about collaboration, we do it. So we don't talk about vertical articulation meetings. We actually have them, and students participate in them. They work on how to team plan a curriculum unit. They start building their PLMs by actually joining professional teacher organizations. And I want for them to experience these victories themselves during their coursework with their colleagues, so we can celebrate, as well as hopefully when they're out in the field during their student teaching or practicum experiences. So it's my hope to set my students up for success by showing them bits and pieces of how schools are meeting goals and finding their victories through collaboration and co-teaching. So although this quote here is a little dated from Bloom, I really believe that it still applies, that teachers teach as they're taught and not as they're taught to teach. So it's critical that teacher educators lead by example in everything that we do, from our instruction to our feedback to even our body language when we're up in front of the classroom. One of the things that I do frequently with my students is just breaking that teacher plane. I want them to realize I'm not just up here in front of the room. I'm here and I'm working with you guys. Another example I can think of too is, we want our teacher candidates to know how we as a department of ed, that we're working together to curriculum map all of their courses in order to prevent a significant overlap in our content, because each of our courses are not islands. They're intentionally sequential, and they're focused on scaffolding candidates' knowledge and skills throughout their entire program. So, our teacher candidates, they emulate us. They want they emulate us, and we want to put our very best teachers out in the field. So we have to do our part and really practice what we preach. So moving along, when leading by example, for me, what I do is, I try to incorporate a variety of models of collaboration, such as ways to co-teach, as well as giving the students an opportunity to role play. Every single week on Monday, my students practice problem solving and just thinking on their feet. I want them to have that experience. So in my daily practice, I am working on really just being more intentional and explicit when our teacher candidates are utilizing these collaborative skills. I want to point out to them, right now we are using collaborative skills, and sometimes I think they do something and they just don't realize that they're doing it. So we're trying to work on being more intentional and providing candidates with maybe a think aloud, so that way they know the process that we're going through when we're making our decisions. So I know certainly I can't speak for everyone, but I firmly believe that this research that Alan presented on collaboration and soft skills and problem solving, it's very telling. And I want the teacher candidates that graduate from Bridgewater College to not just think that they have these skills, but I really want for their administrators and their evaluators to see our candidates with these skills. So cliche, but I know that I'm on board, for bringing these skills to the forefront of my curriculum and really working on trying to ensure that my candidates have more experience and opportunities to collaborate, so that way they are more prepared for the workplace. That's ultimately what we're seeking. We want our candidates to be hired. We know that the job field is there's so many candidates out there applying for positions. We have over 200 candidates applying for one third grade position here in the Valley, and we've got to put forth our very best candidates. So kind of in summary and to close up, I just wanted to point out, I know Alan mentioned this and he believes this as well, that research, it shows time and time again that it's the effectiveness of the teacher who truly makes the greatest impact. In our field of education, we've seen countless federal and state-mandated programs implemented over the years, and millions of dollars spent on these programs. But I just firmly believe it is truly the teacher that makes the greatest impact on our children and their ultimate success. So Anne, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you, Jennie, and thank you, Alan, both for your insights and presentation. We had a question earlier that actually came up when Alan was presenting, but I think that both of you will have will want to chime in on this, which is why I held it till now. And that is that we're living in an area where skills achievement is the focus, the primary focus, and measuring skills achievement is really emphasized across the board. But at the same time, we're encouraged and in some cases mandated to be thinking about 21st century skills collaboration being one of the focal skills that are under consideration. So the question is, do you see this as a tension that is developing between the more traditional curricula and the 21st century skills that we need to be focusing on, or is this a natural complement? And how should we be thinking about those things?
All right, so Jennie and I need to flip a proverbial coin. I'm going to ask you to repeat the question. I think I get it, but I missed a word there. Did you say a tension between 21st century skills and other more hard?
Yeah, and the more traditional. Correct. Yes, I'm wondering if you see there being a tension between those, or whether there's a natural complement.
That is a great. I want to defer to Jennie, but I will comment that there's definitely a tension between hard knowledge, domain expertise, and soft skills or 21st century skills. So those two, definitely there's a tension. Jennie, do you want to weigh in on this as somebody out there?
Sure. I mean,
perspective?
I may even actually, Alan, pull back from your research a little bit, which spoke to how employers are looking for candidates who have, these soft skills over their technical or academic language, or academic knowledge. So although, of course, I believe that content is really important, I think it's such a blend that our candidates have to be able to master everything. And in teaching, it's always it's always juggling, and it's just one more ball that we're adding to the juggle, I guess.
Well, and as David Porter points out here, collaboration has always been a valuable skill. It's just suddenly we're calling it out as a 21st century skill, which is maybe contributing to some of the potential perception of tension between these things. We have a question here from Perry Bott, who asks whether, I believe this is probably primarily directed to you, Jennie. Can you share a few examples of collaborative activities you recommend that instructors implement, especially in the higher ed environment, in say a hybrid online class, and with the caveat that some of these undergraduate courses have hundreds of students in them. How do we bring collaboration into that environment?
Yeah, sure. So that is quite a challenging atmosphere. I'll tell you a little bit of background about Bridgewater College, which may help a little bit too. Bridgewater is a primarily residential college here in the Shenandoah Valley. We have about 1,800 students, and so our class sizes are relatively small. We don't have very often more than 25 students in a class. So I certainly, I'm so sorry, but don't have experience, unfortunately, working with an undergrad class of close to 250 students. But you know, I could tell you maybe some things that I'm doing with my students, and maybe you could see if they would work. You know, one of my favorite kind of activities to work with for collaboration is just a jigsaw, which is really basic, but my students really see like the connection that they have to make when they're doing a jigsaw. I think that, I mean, it's a very good strategy for them to use, and they really understand how they've got to work with a team, but then they have such ownership over their knowledge that they have to be able to present it to somebody else. Alan, I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, you know, again, I was interviewing. This is where it gets really tough. As a market analyst, I'm supposed to say the world looks like X, when often the world looks like X, Y, and Z. And so every organization, every institution is at a different place in understanding this, and maybe every educator is at a different spot. But what I clearly heard from the people I interviewed was that, and these were let's say people who are ahead of you know, advanced thinkers. A lot of people like you on the call. I'd say the people on this call today, you all are already wrestling with these questions. But everybody said, you know, if you watch two learners working on something together, you see that their learning is deeper. So a lot of it is about creating that situation where they're going to have that experiential learning, foster the discoveries and the question asking. I think I mentioned the science teacher who doesn't tell his team how to collaborate. He just forces them to start collaborating, and he makes sure if he does any kind of coaching at all, like here are the kinds of problems that you should be solving, he makes sure that when it comes time to do the actual exams, to give them the exams, the questions are all very different, so that they've learned how to think through what they need to be thinking about as young scientists, but then have to show that they know how to do that in a test. I don't know if that sheds any light on the question, but it's pretty clear that everybody thinks that the collaborative work kicks in when people are doing puzzle solving and problem-based learning and project-based learning.
Great, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, so if you have a question that you'd like to put to our speakers, please enter it into the chat area. But while we give you a chance to think about your questions a little bit further, I want to bring everybody's attention to several things. First is that in this chat box, if you scroll up to the top, there are lots of links that have been added in here throughout the course of this conversation today, including links to some of the studies that Alan has put forward and some other examples that people have been putting up about our friend David Porter is just as active here as he could be, giving us several examples of different sorts of collaboration approaches, and has offered some links to those as well, including a link to some examples about flipped classroom and also community-based problem solving. So some nice resources here. Yes, you are collaborating, David, and thank you for it. There's some nice resources in here. So the other thing that Megan wants to make sure everybody is aware of is that this chat will be saved as well. And so when the link to the recorded session is sent out to everybody, she'll be including this archive chat for folks to access in the future. So it doesn't look like we're
getting... While you're coming with the next question,
yes, Alan.
Let me also mention, and commenting on David's comment would be, from my perch, because I first got involved with this stuff in the quote distance learning world unquote, and we could probably spend hours talking about, you know, what is distance learning versus online learning versus e-learning and brick and mortar learning and all of that. But I think it's interesting how the discussion is evolving to where there's not even any question any longer. Are these tools good, or is it good to open up the classroom Do you try to do the, you mentioned in the chat box here, you talk about community-based problem-based learning that brings together students from various disciplines. I think where the educational community lags, particularly K-12 more so than higher ed, but K-12 community lags is opening up the classroom walls and actually doing that community-based or group-based learning across not just disciplines but across schools. So there's a lot of room to grow in that area. All right, I'll be quiet and let you have it back.
Thank you. Well, appreciate your contribution and insights there. There's also been some suggestions about collaboration related to crowdsourced wikis, and Jennie also has mentioned that, reminded us about what she talked, her initial comments about resources that are available from Google. So lots of stuff out there to tap into for those of you who are trying to think through how to adapt and adopt these approaches to your own work. I don't think that we have any additional questions at this point. So hearing none, let me thank you both very much for your presentations today. They've been quite insightful and opened our eyes to lots of important things to consider. So thank you to the participants. And Megan, did you have anything you wanted to say to close us out today?
Yes, and I want to thank Anne. You did a great job of keeping on track, and as well as keeping up with all of the questions. And thank you. This has been a great discussion. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to the participants. We love seeing an active chat. Learn more about WCET and save the date for our upcoming Leadership Summit, June 10th through the 11th in Santa Fe, and registration is now open for that. The call for proposals for our annual meeting will be going out next month, so look for that. And then we have a few webcasts already scheduled out for March and April. So in the correspondence I send you next week with a link to the recording, I'll include information about those. If you're not a member of WCET, do consider joining and supporting the work that we do. You receive access to our listserv discussions, discounts to our activities, our very popular news digest, and more. Again, I will be sending out the link to the recorded archive and all resources that were shared today. Thank you to Blackboard Collaborate for making the platform available to all of us. Thank you to WCET supporting members who their additional contributions help underwrite much of our events, programs, and activities. And thank you to our WCET annual sponsors, Blackboard, Pearson Learning Solutions, and VitalSource. Thank you all.